Welcome to Eye on Korea, a video podcast produced by the Korea Economic Institute of America. Join us for in-depth conversations with experts and policymakers as we explore issues in Korea's economic and political relationship with the United States and how these issues may influence South Korea's regional strategies and its global relationships. I'm Scott Snyder, President and CEO of the Korea Economic Institute, and today I'm joined by Ambassador Philip Goldberg, former U.S. Ambassador to South Korea. Ambassador Philip Goldberg served as U.S. Ambassador to South Korea from 2022 to 2025. He previously served as Ambassador to the Philippines, Bolivia, and Colombia, and as Chief of the U.S. Mission in UN-administered Kosovo. He served in Washington as Assistant Secretary of State for Intelligence and Research. From June 2009 to June 2010, Goldberg was the coordinator for the implementation of UNSC Resolution 1874, which imposed sanctions on North Korea. He has also been chargé d'affaires at the U.S. embassies in Chile and Cuba, and he holds the personal rank of Career Ambassador, the highest in the U.S. Foreign Service. Thank you for joining us today, Ambassador Goldberg.
Thanks for the invitation.
And I want to welcome you to Eye on Korea. Of course, you finished your assignment as ambassador to South Korea in January of this year and have had a few months to reflect on that and watch. You actually left in the middle of the movie, I think, because of the declaration of martial law and subsequent impeachment. What is your impression of all the changes that have occurred over the course of the past 6 months since your departure?
In some ways, Scott, I think I got to maybe near the end of the movie because I think that once the impeachment took place, it was pretty clear it would be upheld by the Constitutional Court. And then I think this election was actually preordained, the outcome. The unpopularity of the Yoon administration, even before the declaration of martial law that was then cemented by martial law, was pretty clear. And so Lee Jae-myung's election and now the president of the Republic of Korea was something that I think was pretty clear to most observers. In terms of what has happened since, as I say, it's kind of an outgrowth of everything that took place while I was there. The declaration of martial law, the impeachment on the second attempt. As I say, the Constitutional Court decision to me was going to be apparent. I happened to have dinner the night of Han Duck-soo's impeachment as Prime Minister and acting president, which was a surprise. But then he came back, then he left mostly in a kind of futile attempt to become the candidate from the right. So I kind of had a good feel for what was happening because of being involved during that period. So it doesn't seem that far removed.
So stepping back from the just getting through that process now that it's over, I wonder if you have some observations about the health and weaknesses of Korean democracy, and maybe particularly in a comparative context, given all of your other experience around the world.
I think it showed itself to be very healthy, the democracy of South Korea. 80% turnout, real interest in the outcome of the campaign. As I said, a rejection of the martial law period that was evident during the protests against President Yoon, but also during the election, as shown in the results. So I think the state of democracy is very strong. There are some sort of warning signals out there, though, also. One of them is that now the Democratic Party has a real majority because it now has the presidency in addition to, if not a supermajority, a very strong majority in the assembly. They really control what will happen in South Korea and have the ability to put through their program. That comes at a time when Lee Jae-myung, despite his solid victory, didn't get to the 50% threshold. and really received a similar vote to what he got the last time, only he lost by a small percentage to Yoon Suk-yeol. I think that those warning signals are how Lee Jae-myung, and he has said all the right things in his acceptance speech and in the last few days, how he handles the issues of polarization in Korea. He wants to be a unifier, but he doesn't come from a background that is particularly unifying. And so it'll be a real challenge for him.
What do you think that this episode has, what are the lessons for the U.S.-Korea relationship, and what is the impact of the martial law declaration and the entire impeachment process for the relationship?
The declaration of martial law, of course, took place in the last days of the Biden administration. I think there was a great feeling of remorse here in Washington about what had happened. The idea that a leader with whom President Biden had such a close relationship with, who viewed him as a pillar of democratic practice, had declared a martial law. Now we're in a new era. We have two new presidents. First, President Trump, who had already been elected at that time, but had not yet taken office, and with President Lee Jae-myung. And so we'll have a different dynamic. The dynamic, at least for the initial period, will be focused on the tariffs issue. But there are other issues between the two countries that will be in play, and some of them more positive, if you will, about the connection between the two countries, including shipbuilding and the possible Korean participation in a pipeline in Alaska. We'll see how those go. But there'll be a lot of difficulties, and a huge challenge will be for the new president of South Korea to try to restore a more stable relationship with China on the one hand, and yet satisfy an administration in Washington that clearly views Asia policy now as China-focused and in our competition and sometimes confrontation with China.
So what do you think are the greatest dangers in that context for South Korean foreign policy?
Again, how to balance those interests and how it can be done. And I think there are some other examples of countries that have handled it in certain ways. Europe, for a period of time, was trying to balance those two. They've come now back into the American point of view about technology transfers and some of the dangers of of China. But it's going to be a difficult challenge for Lee Jae-myung.
So underlying that, I'm wondering, it almost feels like even though there was so many accomplishments in the context of revitalizing the relationship in the Biden administration, that somehow we have a crisis of credibility, maybe on both sides. A lot of Koreans are questioning the Trump administration's commitment to Korea, but also the Trump administration seems to be very doubtful about South Korea's new administration. What are the steps that can be taken to really close that credibility gap on both sides?
I don't know if the administration in Washington is willing. One of the changes that has taken place is a different expectation of alliances in the change of the administrations from the Biden to Trump administrations. Less of an emphasis, quite frankly, on bilateral and multilateral alliances. And so I don't know how, unless there's a bit of a change. It's much more transactional now. And when I say transactional, I might even say it's difficult to describe it as such, because transactional usually means there are things flowing back and forth in the different directions that are to the benefit of both countries. I think there's a huge expectation in Washington under the Trump administration that those most of those issues will be flowing to the benefit of the United States, starting with tariffs and those negotiations. So it's going to be difficult for a change if there is a questioning of confidence between the two countries. I think that President Lee is pragmatic. He'll want to try to satisfy some of those demands, some of those requests from the United States, but only up to a point.
So it sounds like part of what it is that it's not just a Korea problem, it's a global problem, adjusting to the Trump administration, perhaps. But
yeah, it's the same issue that Europe is dealing with.
But I want to ask you about the global rise of Korean influence, because it seems like there's a whole list of pay items that are being marketed these days. You've watched that over the course of the past few years. What do you think accounts for that? What is the secret sauce in Korea that has somehow become one that the rest of the world is interested in acquiring?
Korea is a great success story. It is due largely to the innovation and hard work of the Korean people, the companies that have harnessed some of the great technologies, starting with electronics and now semiconductors, electric vehicles. And it's become kind of cool, the manufacturing of Korea, the not so much semiconductors, although that is the oil of the 21st century. But even with, if you look going from the Hyundai Kia models of old, like the Pony, to what they have now, where they're winning all kinds of design awards. So it has to do with innovation, with the very idea that Korea is an important country for production, and so I think that as I say, it's largely due to that spirit in Korea. There are a lot of warning signs out there too. The demographic cliff, and how do they keep employment going and keep that innovation and hard work when there are going to be fewer people. That's there are some real danger signs out there too.
Well, so one of the challenges, I think, is how to keep that going, even despite the shrinkage of the workforce, et cetera. I don't know if you have any suggestions about how that might be done.
We have some of those same challenges in the U.S., but I don't think any country that I know of has been successful at turning around the fertility rate. And so I don't know that that's I know that the last administration, the Yoon government, tried to even starting to create a government ministry to deal with the population and fertility. But I'm not sure that will be successful. The question is how to distribute the resources that you have. Another issue for the Lee government is going to be, as is the case here, on pensions. As the people start to retire, whether there's enough money in the pension system. So those are challenges for any aging, and in the case of Korea, super aging societies.
So on the subject of global Korea, you probably have some very interesting insights based on what you've heard from other places where you have served. I'm wondering what the rise of Korea might look like in terms of what you hear from other places where you have strong relationships around the world.
I think Korea is admired for what they've done. They're an example of a country that came out of a dire situation after the war all the way into the 60s and 70s, real economic challenges, and were able to build an economy and a society that are admired around the world. So I think that is the largest take from other people I talk to. But there are a lot more connections also. There are new areas For example, in the arms industry, where they're selling a lot more in Europe, the huge deals with Poland and other East European countries. No, I think it's seen as a leader. I don't know whether it's fully accepted that role, but it is. They're admired and are looked to now.
Turning back to geopolitics, clearly there's a lot of pressure in terms of maintaining alignment with the United States, and Korea also has a lot of economic relationships with China that I'm sure you observed from Seoul. What do you think is likely to be the best strategy for trying to navigate that set of pressures, especially given South Korea's geopolitical positioning as a smaller country that in some ways is executing a foreign policy that is contingent upon or actually limited by the decisions and choices that its neighbors might make?
Korea is very heavily invested in China, as we all are. The key will be to try to separate out some of the high-tech, high-end products that go to China or are produced there from the rest, and whether that's possible, because so much of the Korean investment and interest is in things like semiconductors. Whereas with the rest of us, with the U.S., there are other products that are not necessarily strategic or technologically advanced. Some of those are not even produced in China anymore. They're produced in Vietnam or Malaysia, clothing and shoes and so forth. So I think that's going to be really, and Korea and the companies in Korea have accepted that. I think there's an understanding at Samsung and at SK that they have to start moving down the technology in terms of trade. But those are areas that semiconductors represents, 20% of Korea's exports. So it's a difficult dilemma for any government in Seoul. And that speaks to, in addition to the history of Korean-Chinese relations, why Lee Jae-myung wants to put it on a better course, a less conflictive course. But that's really, I think, the only way forward. One of the other issues at the moment is the reduction of or possible elimination of subsidies for electric vehicles under the CHIPS Act, for semiconductors, and what that will mean for the interests of Samsung and SK especially. Hyundai, I don't know that they'll have much of an option because they've basically been run out of the China market. They're trying to build up India as a counter to that, but they are really all in the American market. And so the tariffs on automobiles is going to be a big challenge.
Let me conclude by turning to the North Korea issue. Obviously, not much was going on in the inter-Korean relationship while you were there in Seoul, but I'm sure that you spent some time watching and thinking about what the world looks like from Kim Jong-un's perspective. And so I'm curious, what do you think actually, how do you think he views the current situation? Trump is back, but he's got his relationship with Putin. What is his course for managing this? Now we've got a new South Korean administration that may want to reach out to him, but we don't know necessarily if he's ready to turn his back again so that he can face a South Korean government. How do you think that all of that is going to play out, and what are the greatest risks and concerns related to how Kim Jong-un looks at the world right now?
Well, I think you're right to say that what will happen will largely depend on his calculation, on Kim Jong-un's calculation. He's doing pretty well, having broken out of isolation, number one, and dependence on China by establishing this relationship with Putin and Russia. He now has some technology coming in for his arms industry. It wasn't lost on many people that the very day that Lee Jae-myung was inaugurated, Sergei Shoigu was in Pyongyang talking about their special relationship. So a lot of this will depend on how Kim Jong-un sees his options at the moment. I think for most of us, we see that there isn't going to be a huge immediate interest in moving forward. Because he's doing pretty well. Eventually, he'll want to complete his cycle of nuclear development and may want to reach out to try to get sanctions relief in return for arms negotiations, not for disarmament, not for denuclearization, which is still the position of the United States and South Korea. So it really depends on that calculation. I think at the moment there isn't the incentive for him to get involved in negotiations with either. He's renounced reunification as a goal with the South. So that means, what does that mean for dialogue? Why would he want to have dialogue if that's the case? He does want sanctions relief, I'm sure. But that doesn't mean that he's going to go in immediately to try to do that. It's an interesting area of possible cooperation between the United States and South Korea if the two positions and the reasons for going forward are coordinated. Both countries want to deal with the nuclear issue. Especially the United States, but also South Korea. And how that's handled, it'll have a lot of impact on, number one, what happens with South Korea's interest, the public discussion that's taken place on nuclear developments. That's not going to affect us much during the Lee Jae-myung administration, I'm convinced, and he has always been against a nuclear South Korea. And I think that includes any return of tactical nuclear weapons, which was something that Kim Moon-soo, the conservative candidate, had talked about. So again, I think the ball is really in Kim Jong-un's court, and I think he'll want to keep the ball on his side of the court, if I can continue the metaphor, for a while.
Okay, well, I feel like we are just getting started, and yet our time has come to an end. Ambassador Goldberg, I really want to thank you for coming and participating in our program today, and also participating in this taping of Eye on Korea.
Thanks very much, Scott.
And thank you for joining us on Eye on Korea. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss the next one, and leave a review to help others discover the show. Follow the Korea Economic Institute of America on social media, or visit keia.org for more resources, events, and expert analysis on Korea. We'll see you next time on Eye on Korea.